Good evening. Today is Sunday, March 15th, 2026. I'm Rich Stevens, and this is The Cold Take. What you're about to hear is news from this week, taken only from primary sources like press conferences and court documents. You can find those sources and attribution for every story at thecoldtake.com. We begin in New York City. On Saturday, March 7th, a protest was held outside Mayor Zohran Mamdani's residence. The protest was called, quote, "Stop the Islamic Takeover of New York City, Stop New York City Public Muslim Prayer." They were met by a counter-protest called, quote, "Run Nazis Out of New York City." Around 12:15 p.m., 18-year-old Emir Balat and 19-year-old Ibrahim Qayoumi lit an improvised explosive device and threw it at the anti-Islam protesters. They then lit a second device and dropped it near NYPD officers before attempting to flee. Both were caught and pledged allegiance to ISIS before being federally charged under terrorism statutes, and each faces up to 20 years in prison if convicted. The devices did not detonate and no one was injured. Video of that event is at thecoldtake.com. Royal Canadian Mounted Police responded to shots fired at the U.S. consulate in Toronto on Tuesday, March 10th. They found shell casings and damage to the exterior of the building. RCMP said they believe a white Honda CR-V stopped in front of the building, that two people got out, shot at the building with a handgun, and then drove away. Their press release says they increased security around embassies and are treating the investigation as a national security incident. The United States government has not issued a statement that we could find. On Thursday, March 12th, Ayman Mohammed Ghazali drove into Temple, Israel in Oakland County, Michigan. Private security at the synagogue engaged the driver and ended his life before he could exit his vehicle. There were no additional fatalities. Information was provided by U.S. Immigration, the mayor of Dearborn Heights, and the Lebanese government. Ghazali was a Lebanese immigrant, granted citizenship in 2026. He lost family members this month in the conflict between Hezbollah terrorists in Lebanon and Israel. The government of Lebanon condemned the attack amid their ongoing efforts to disarm Hezbollah. Around 10:45 Thursday morning, March 12th, Old Dominion University police received calls of an active shooter inside the school. Officers arrived within 4 minutes and found the active assailant deceased. 3 victims were taken to the hospital, where one succumbed to his wounds. The FBI identified the shooter as Mohammed Baylor Jola, who was arrested and pled guilty to attempting to provide material support to ISIS in 2016. He was in prison from 2017 until 2024. He shouted Allahu Akbar before opening fire, and according to the FBI, students responded and, quote, rendered him no longer alive. They noted that he was not shot. That concludes terrorism this week. Meanwhile, in politics, the partial government shutdown over funding for the Department of Homeland Security continued this week as Democrats and Republicans traded blame in official statements. On Wednesday, March 11th, Senator Todd Young said the shutdown began after Democrats demanded changes to immigration enforcement before approving DHS funding. He called the lapse in funding a national security risk. On Thursday, March 12th, Senator Alex Padilla said he voted against additional funding for ICE and CBP, stating that the agencies, quote, don't need another blank check, they need accountability. House Appropriations Democrats said Republicans are blocking funding for parts of the department, while House Appropriations Republicans said Senate Democrats caused the shutdown by refusing to pass a full-year DHS funding bill approved by the House. There is no end in sight for this dispute, as they all are in Congress. If you like your news like an Irishman prefers his grains, distilled down to the best parts, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with your friends. It helps us grow. Useless. In world news, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth spoke Friday morning, March 13th, about the conflict in Iran. He asserted that the U.S. and Israel have destroyed over 15,000 targets and maintain complete control of the airspace over Iran. Hegseth maintains that Iran has no air defenses, air force, or navy, and that their missile volume is down 90% and one-way attack drones 95%. He emphasized that every company that builds components for ballistic missiles in Iran has been destroyed and pointed out that Iranian leadership has gone underground. The Secretary of War pushed back on headlines that the war is widening and that the U.S. has no plan to control and protect the Strait of Hormuz, saying instead that what is widening is U.S. advantage and Iran's strategy to disrupt the strait has been in place for decades. He called the claims unserious. 7 members of the Iranian women's national soccer team have been granted asylum in Australia. The team did not sing the Islamic Republic national anthem at their match. After some prompting by President Trump, the Australian government offered asylum visas to the team. 7 members accepted the offer, but one later withdrew her request and returned to Iran. The other 6 remained in Australia, where police are housing them in a safe location until they can be provided services to complete immigration. Trump was initially critical of Australia's response, but after speaking to Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, he praised the leader, saying he is, quote, doing a very good job having to do with this rather delicate situation. Changing gears to current events, February 26th, Yamaha Motor Company announced they will relocate their U.S. headquarters from California to Kennesaw, Georgia. The company indicated that the move aims to improve profitability in the U.S. market. They will sell a 25-acre facility in Cypress, California, after operating there since 1979. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp expressed gratitude, saying, quote, after many years of great partnership, we are honored and proud to welcome Yamaha's American headquarters to the #1 state for business. Friday morning, March 13th, Judge Tony Graff, presiding over the trial of the accused Charlie Kirk assassin, held another pre-trial hearing. This hearing was to address media coverage and related issues. After hearing arguments from both the defense and the prosecution, the judge ruled that, quote, in balance, the defendant has not provided a sufficient basis for the court to find that the interests favoring closure outweigh the interest favoring an open proceeding and the presumptive right to access. He also noted, quote, moreover, as a Utah Supreme Court recognized, even in highly publicized cases, a defendant's right to a fair trial can be protected through the regular, time-honored process for selecting jurors, like enlarging the voir dire of potential jurors and utilizing a detailed juror questionnaire.
I'd like to voir dire this witness as to the extent of her expertise.
Now, if Mr. Trotter wishes to voir dire the witness as to the extent of her expertise in this area, I'm sure he's going to be more than satisfied.
The next hearing will be April 17th and will address the defense's motion to exclude all cameras from the courtroom. Subscribe for updates on this case. Florida Attorney General James Uthmire spoke Monday, March 9th about the state's efforts to combat child predators. He announced a sentence for Michael Ambrosio of 25 years for CSAM that included toddlers and babies. He also announced the passing of House Bill 1297, a new Florida law that allows capital charges for sexual battery of a minor under 12 years old. Existing Florida law places limitations on the death penalty, so the jury must find at least 2 aggravating factors before determining a sentence of life in prison or death. This new law is in conflict with a 2008 U.S. Supreme Court ruling in Kennedy v. Louisiana, which held that the 8th Amendment disallows the death penalty in cases where the victim survived. The state expects challenges on these grounds, but is prepared to argue their case. Markets slid for a third straight week, with the Dow Jones dropping 2%, a 943-point loss with a closing of 46,558. NASDAQ lost 281 points, finishing down 1.25% at 22,105. The S&P 500 lost more than 1.5%, dropping 108 points and closing at 6,632. Even gold continued to drop, closing at $5,023 per ounce. The $135 loss erased more than 2.5% of value. And in sports, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy spoke at a press conference to announce the Freedom 250 IndyCar Grand Prix in Washington, D.C. The 1.7-mile circuit will run down Pennsylvania Avenue and include 7 turns. Cars will pass the National Archives, the Washington Monument, and the National Mall. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser thanked Secretaries Duffy and Burgum and expressed her excitement for this event, saying that D.C. is the sports capital of the country and, quote, "Wherever you're coming from in America, remember this. We have won a World Series, a Stanley Cup, a WNBA championship, an NSWL championship, all while I've been mayor. It was nice to see officials set aside political posturing and just celebrate sports and America's 250th birthday. That race will take place August 23rd. If you like your news like Irish coffee, full of Jameson, subscribe to the channel. Give us a like. Share this with your friends. We appreciate it. Formula One announced the cancellation of the Bahrain and Saudi Arabian Grands Prix. Yes, that's how you say it. No, it does not feel good coming out of your mouth. Amid the ongoing Middle East conflict, Formula One cleared the April calendar, giving teams 5 weeks off between Japan and Miami. In China this weekend, Russell took the sprint pole ahead of his teammate Antonelli. Russell finished first, with Antonelli fifth after a 10-second penalty for a collision. Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton finished the podium for Ferrari. In qualifying for the main event, Antonelli became the youngest pole sitter in the history of F1. He brought the car home in first, becoming the second youngest driver to win a Grand Prix. MLB spring training is underway, along with the World Baseball Classic. The United States will face the Dominican Republic tonight for the first of 2 semifinal games. Tomorrow night will feature Venezuela and Italy. The winners will play the final on Tuesday night at 8 Eastern. And finally, this week is conference tournament week for men's college basketball. Miami of Ohio was handed their first loss of the season by UMass in the MAC tournament, but the MAC will likely see 2 teams into the tournament this year anyway. Vanderbilt ended a 12-game winning streak for the defending national championship Florida Gators yesterday. The Commodores will now face Arkansas for the SEC Tournament Championship. 13th-ranked St. John's beat 6th-ranked UConn to take the Big East title. Top-ranked Duke beat UVA for the ACC Championship, and Michigan will play Purdue today to decide the Big Ten. The tournament committee will announce bids and seeding for the 2026 NCAA men's basketball tournament tonight. And like it or not, that's what happened. I'm Rich Stevens, and this has been The Cold Take. I swear, the more news I watch, the more nope. Congress is still no good. It's a shame.